So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to go deeply into Tonglen and combine it with a very short teaching on mind training, which is taking joys and pains onto the path. And it occurred to me after Timothy was asking questions about how he experiences connecting to the practice, that it would be really good to go back to the root, which is our Tonglen practice, and really look at how we connect to the instructions, which can be quite abstract. And this teaching on connecting or bringing joys and pains to the path and the traditional Tonglen start in exactly the same way. So I'm going to pull up the general Tonglen instructions. So the first instruction in this traditional presentation of Tonglen, and there are various ways to practice Tonglen, but is to flash on the absolute. We could say flash on bodhicitta, flash on your Buddha nature, flash on your awakened mind, but some way connect to that. And don't worry, this is on the website as a resource. You can look at, I think if you do a drop-down thing in terms of resources, it's right there. So mainly I want you to, this morning, connect experientially. So after we flash on bodhicitta, then we go to working with a texture, so a little more difficult, then working with a personal situation, and then expanding the picture. So we're looking at what is our mind, what is awakened mind, what does it mean to open our hearts in compassion, what does it mean to have the aspiration to take the sufferings in and send out all the joys that we feel. So the instructions are very, very simple, but they have a world of meaning within them. And in the instruction of taking the joys and pains onto the path, it begins with start with an awakened mind. So again, we have this instruction to flash on the awakened mind, and that's what I want to start with this morning. So if we were to say flash on the awakened mind, we could say, you know, what is that? I'm not awakened. What do you mean flash on the awakened mind? What do we know about the awakened mind, though? We know something about the four immeasurables. We've been growing in loving kindness and compassion, rejoicing and equanimity. We know something about shamatha practice. So the capacity, even if it's just for a flash, to go to an experience and hold that experience in an undistracted way. And I think even deeper than that is the philosophical root, which is quite different from the philosophical root that we grew up with, which is every mind has the full potential of awakening because every mind has the seed of Buddha nature. And not only does every mind have the seed of Buddha nature, every mind is Buddha nature, but it's occluded by our habitual patterns, by lifetime after lifetime of building these patterns, even in this life, if we can look at, and we have been looking at the impulse to prioritize ourselves first, and then from that comes anger, jealousy, addictions, etc., etc. And I like the example, every Rinpoche has one favorite example that they use over and over and over again. So for Buddha nature and our inherently perfect minds, not what we experience, but inherently what is our nature. Khandro Rinpoche uses the example of a white sheet of paper. So imagine just a white sheet of paper. And then if we had a pepper shaker and we, dumped a bunch of pepper on it, the white sheet of paper would start to be covered by black dots. So that is the first patterns, the first distractions, the first habits. And then we build on them and build on them. And if we piled on the pepper, eventually the sheet of paper would be black. What we would see would be a pile of black. But if we removed all the obscurations, if we just dumped the pepper off, we'd be back to the white sheet of paper. So this is very different than the Judeo-Christian understanding of original sin. And so we have to realize that it takes us a while to shift gears to understand, what if I looked at what I believe about myself from a different perspective? Not the perspective of original sin, and even as a baby I was born with this original sin, to original goodness. An original goodness that was covered by a layer of confusion that I build upon, covered in the sense of we are born with the karma that propelled us into this birth, but then we built on that. And even if we weren't going to worry about karma at all, we can see that, from the moment we were born, we started building patterns. I'm watching my niece, who's just a little over 1 year old. And when she can't have what she wants, she gets frustrated and she starts screaming. We went through that stage. So we built pattern on top of pattern, and, we still experience irritation when we get frustrated. So we have these deeply embedded patterns. But from the Buddhist perspective, inherently, there is only the Buddha nature. So this flashing on awakened mind, flashing on Buddha nature, is built on a little bit of trust or confidence that this perspective might hold a truth for you. And one way of beginning to trust this perspective is going into the four immeasurables and noticing, I can access kindness. I can access compassion. Fully bloomed, that is Buddha nature. But even in this life, even if I can only, in a situational way, rest in loving kindness or rest in compassion, I can see and experience that seed is within me. And as we develop this seed further, then we can see that there is a joy arising when we realize, wow, not only does loving kindness exist within my heart, but when I'm resting in loving kindness, I am feeling joy. And then as we go further with our compassion and kindness and begin to extend that loving kindness and compassion to folks we don't know, folks who irritate us, when we work with the difficult people in our lives, then we can see, I may not be able to rest in equanimity yet, but I can see there's a path towards equanimity. So we know something about the four immeasurables, and we know something about shamatha. So as we work with that together, we can say, this isn't the absolute, but it's the seed of the absolute. And the more I work with this, the closer I get to being able to rest there without pulling up a narrative saying, I am feeling kind or I am feeling compassionate. We're resting in the experience, not the narrative. So we can get into a more authentic understanding gradually with the four immeasurables. So when we go through the instruction of resting in awakened mind this morning, allow yourself to explore, how do you touch base with it? And each of us may be touching base in a slightly different way, but we're getting comfortable with how our mind understands the Dharma and how our mind uniquely finds its pathway into the experience of the four immeasurables, which is a seed of Buddha nature, and how our mind maybe does not experience abiding there yet, but can work with shamatha to return over and over and over again. So I think in this first instruction in Tonglen, when it says flash on bodhicitta, flash on awakened mind, it's acknowledging that we might only be able now to experience it as a flash, that we're not yet ready or have the experience level to abide. So it's actually saying this is where we are, and however and wherever we are, touch base in a way that you can experience today. So now I'm going to also combine that with this, it's a very pithy mind training. So it also starts with first generate awakened mind. So let's sit with this instruction, not worrying in any way about should it be this or that, but more, what am I confident about, and how can I flash and then rest on that aspect that I have confidence in terms of this seed of bodhicitta. Now, what takes this experience from the relative to the absolute is an understanding of something that we call the three spheres. So you may have experienced when you were finding your path to awakened bodhicitta for immeasurables, that there was an inner narrative. Often when we're thinking about loving kindness, in the relative state, we're thinking of loving kindness towards a little puppy, our family, the beautiful sunny day, the nature that we're experiencing on the sunny day. Or relative to compassion, I see the suffering in my family, I see the suffering in my town. So it's relative. It's I'm over here and I'm seeing something that's outside of myself. When we combine the four immeasurables with the three spheres, we soften that narrative. So there are so many English words that don't really approach really what bodhicitta is. But one word that we've been using in the translation of the Heart Sutra is boundlessness. So boundlessness means no boundary. And if we go back to thinking, I'm generating loving kindness towards my favorite puppy, there's a puppy that begins and ends somewhere, and there's a me that begins and ends somewhere. So they're boundaries. What happens when I soften those boundaries? Part of it has to do with the narrative, and part of it has to do with the experience of a constructed reality that has a self that ends with skin, perhaps, and another being that begins with their skin. And or I think of the skin on my feet ending and the floor beginning. What happens when we soften our mind's tendency to construct all these boundaries? So go back to the particular way that you were touching base and notice, are you finding your way to bodhicitta through a narrative? Is there a boundary that separates you and the phenomenal world, including all beings? Is there an experiential separation? And, of course, we're not able to release all those boundaries right away, but we can soften the sort of imperative belief of separation. So let's sit with flashing on bodhicitta, seeing our connection to bodhicitta, and seeing a way to soften any boundary of separation, demanding of our mind to keep self on one side and other on the other side, just softening. Now, this pith instruction we'll take a little deeper next week, but the wonderful instruction that it offers is when we're flashing on the awakened mind, investigating what that means, then close that investigation with visualizing your understanding through, you might visualize the Buddha and realize when it's totally without boundaries, this is Buddha's realization. You might visualize Tara or Chenrezig, any of the meditation deities you might be working with. But connecting to the indivisible unity that this flash of bodhicitta is with your seed that's becoming and your inherent absolute that has always been there, but that we recognize as Buddha's realization or the compassion of, let's say, Tara or Chenrezig. So let's connect to our experience, connect to Buddha's realization, which is our full potential. Seamlessly indivisible, resting in that confidence. So for the next few weeks, we're going to go in depth into Tonglen. And today we went a little more in depth on the first instruction. What does it mean to flash onto bodhicitta, or flash onto your Buddha nature, or flash on your awakened mind? And so I'd like to open for people to be able to ask questions or share their pathway and what their experience is, or express growing confidence or concern about confidence, whatever you'd like to discuss. And let me close the live so we can have a confidential discussion. Bodhicitta, excellent impression, precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.